Hey guys, so today I want to talk about auto layout and how to use auto layout in your workflow, how to understand the different properties and use those properties to create efficient, lovely layouts. So, the first thing I want to say is auto layout is not a requirement to be a good designer. Being a good designer is you understanding how to use UI and UX principles and incorporating that into your design. So, but auto layout is just this thing that if you know how to use it, it helps you to become more efficient. It helps you to be faster, and it also helps your developers or the development team to understand what you did design, understand the spacing involved, helps your alignment and spacing to become more consistent without having to do too much manual work, right? So that's something I just wanted to drop. It doesn't make you a good designer, but it makes you a more efficient and faster one. Now let's go to properties, auto layout properties. Auto layout properties, if you do understand auto layout properties, you'll be able to understand how to break, change layouts with auto layout. So this is where we have to start from. And there are three major ones. There's hog, fixed, and fill. These are the things you have to change to create certain effects in auto layout. Now let's start with hog. Hog is the default property that happens when you select two elements or you click anything and you do shift A or this to apply auto layout. You see that depending on how the position of those elements you clicked is, how it is, you see that hog is being applied in that direction. If it's horizontal like this, it's being applied in this horizontal direction, and the width is saying hog. And what does hog now mean? It means that as the child's elements, the elements inside of the auto layout frame, as it grows, as there are more elements inside of the auto layout frame, it expands. So if I do Ctrl D, the external auto layout frame keeps expanding to um, it's like you putting air into a balloon, so it keeps expanding. So that's what the hog property looks like. So if an auto layout has a hog property, it keeps expanding to fit the width or the cumulative width of the children element. Now, when you have hog has to be either on the width, on the height, or on both, right? So when I did Shift A, let me control Z back. When I did Shift A, it applied hog only on the width because the position was like, oh, this is like horizontal. If it was, if I went and then did this position was here, and I clicked on both of them and did Shift A, the hog would be on the height because it's looking more like a vertical thing, and then the direction is vertical. The hog would be on the height to align with this vertical. So the position also matters. It doesn't matter like that because you can always change it, but the starting position matters for Figma to know whether they are giving it a vertical or horizontal. So that is hog. Now, one thing I want to say is I'm just going to click on this to make it horizontal now. And one thing I want to say is if you if you have a hog on, let's say, the width, and then you want to change the frame, the size of the frame of the button. Let me even give this a color. Like let's say this is the frame. It has this color. Now you want this width to increase in size. If you come and say, "Oh, let me drag the edge so that it increases," it's going to snap from hog to a fixed width of 179 because what you're telling Figma now is, oh, I want it to be this specific width. So whenever you want to change the width of something and you want it to remain in hog, you shouldn't drag the edge. What you should do is come to these controls, so increase this or increase the margin depending on what you are trying to do. So if you want more space between these children elements, you increase this. If you want more margin, you increase this, right? And it helps to not move things from hog to fix unintentionally, because I know how many times I've fallen into that trap. Now, talking about margin, here we have our padding. So they call it horizontal padding, vertical padding. Um, this is quite easy for you to understand. Just you applying more spacing at the sides, or applying more spacing at the sides, at the top and bottom. Here's left and right. Now let's go to fixed. Let's go to fixed. Fixed. One thing I will say is, if let's say the width is set to fixed. Now we're looking at the width now. If the width is set to fixed, and you want to have, I think we didn't talk about having equal spacing and all of that. But let's say you duplicated a particular child element. Your auto layout frame is going to remain fixed even if the child element keeps growing. That frame is going to remain fixed, and you have to have that in mind that when you're working with fixed, then even if you are increasing this, it's not like hog that the container or the frame begins to expand. It stays the same way. um Even if you do this, it stays the same way. So you have to like manually come here and do this and do that, right? But if you want to do equal spacing, one thing you could do is, there's this thing called auto. Auto helps to create or give equal spacing that is available inside of that frame. So if you're working with fixed and you want all the children elements to be inside and also have equal spacing, just make it auto. And then you can align things. This is like the alignments inside of that frame. Let's say we have this. You can align things to the middle, align things to the bottom and the top, right? Even though it's fixed, this alignment still works. So the alignment works for all properties, hug, fixed, and fill. Now that is fixed, and let's look at fill. What does fill mean? Now, one thing you should know is fill is, let's say fill is judgmental. It only listens to people that are above him or her, not to be gender biased. So it only listens to frames that has auto layouts outside of it, right? So what I mean is, if you have this frame, you won't see the fill property if it doesn't have a parent frame that is an auto layout, right? So this frame is the parent frame, and as you can see, it's in free form. It's not in auto layout. Auto layout stands for when you have vertical, fixed, or grid. Vertical, horizontal, or grid. So you will not be able to see fill in the properties unless you have a frame, a parent frame outside that has an auto layout. So don't be surprised when you're saying, yeah, you're trying to find fill and you're like, why can't I find fill? It's supposed to be here. Figma is just so confusing. How will fill be showing up in some places and sometimes it doesn't show? What's going on? It's because there's no parent frame that is on auto layout. So that's what I mean by fill is judgmental. Now, but if you look at this is an auto layout frame. So if I should go to the child, like this button, you'd see that if I click on this, I now see fill. So that's one thing you should know about fill. Now, for fill, if I had this as fixed, right, and let's say this is having a space in between to be 12, right? So you could click on this. You could click on this and say, I want this to fill the entire space to the right, right? Or And I think this is constrained to top left. That's why the only space it can fill actually is to the right. So I want this to, and then we'll talk about constraints on another day, but it's quite easy. So I want this to fill to the right. You can set the text to fill because it has its own width and height. You can set it to fill, and then it will fill the entire space to the right while pushing everything that is at the right of it to the extreme end. The only thing that remains is that it still respects the space between the spacing in between, but then every other remaining space is filled by that particular element that is having fill. So fill is just I want to expand to cover as much space available, you know, and if you had this is text, so text has this width and height. It almost works like an auto layout. No, it doesn't almost. It actually works like an auto layout because it has hog fill and all that. But then let's say you didn't have text and you had um, this frame and this frame, and you wanted to like okay this icon and this icon, but of course yeah with frames. So if you wanted to set it to fill, you can still do that, right? So both text, both frames, you can use this fill to expand and fill up as much space as available, and it then pushes every single other element outside of it to the extreme end. So this is something you can use to you could use it to create specific types of layouts that okay I want this to push everything to the right, I want this to do this, I want this to do that. So that's fill for you, and that's it for the properties. Now I want to talk about nested layout a bit. Nested layouts or nested auto layouts is when you have auto layout frames that are inside of another auto layout. So if you look at this now, this is an auto layout frame, and then we have this. If I do Control A now, you see one, two, and three has been selected. But this on its own too is another auto layout that is set in a vertical direction. Then we have another auto layout that is set to a horizontal direction. So you need to understand that if you want to get certain types of layouts, certain complex layouts, there are you have to break it down into okay, this is going to be um, a group. Then I would have this group and this element to form another group in this direction. Then I'll have this to form another group, or in this case, auto layout. When I mean group, I mean auto layout in a vertical direction, right? Then I'll have all of this to be one group. Then I'll have this group, and this group to form another auto layout. And it will stay in this structure because it's it's broken down into specific auto layouts. And one thing now is that this gives you flexibility in terms of okay, if I want this auto layout to have a specific spacing, I could just do this, right? And it won't affect the other items in this layout. So I'm just specific to the spacing I'm giving specific to just these two items. And then if I wanted to give a spacing that is different from this 18, I could now to give another spacing, right? So it is sort of the spacing or the controls you have on specific element is constrained to the auto layout that you sort of like a contract that you have between these two that okay you guys are together. So if I want to increase your spacing, I can then change it. If I want to give a margin between the two of you at the top, I can do that. you know so that is one thing you need to know about nested layout. Helps you to create complex layouts with auto layouts, and the fact that I use auto layout helps you to be able to edit it easily. Now enough talking, I think I should just go ahead, and it's 21 minutes already. I think I should use the remaining like 5 minutes creating the auto layout the way they've done. So you see how everything just plays. Now, being that I want this two to have a specific spacing, I could say okay, this and this, Shift A, and then it gives a vertical auto layout. And the reason it's giving a vertical auto layout, of course, like I said, is because of the positioning, top and bottom. So it gives vertical. Height is now set to hog, and I can see that it's 8, right? If I wanted to say okay, I want this to be 6, I can reduce it and it will reduce. Now this all of this will be because I want them to have equal spacing, the same spacing, adjustments, controls. I would give everything an auto layout, and then each of them is going to be 11. I can say okay, I want this to be 12, right? And one thing I can do also is I can give a padding across both the top and bottom and the left and right to form another like, and that's one great thing about layout. Now, if you hover over here and hold Shift Alt and get close to it, you see this icon, or would I say icon, this symbol. If you click on Shift, Control, and Alt, um, you can actually give a margin that is top, bottom, and the sides, right? So that is something helpful that you should know. Shift, if it's just Shift and Alt, it will be left and right. If it's at this side, it will be top and bottom for the same Shift Alt. If it's on any of the side and you clicked on Shift Control Alt, it will be on all sides. So I could give it a stroke and say Control V, and then I want this to be white. So you see how, let me give this 8. So you see how this has created because of the margin I gave to it, it has created its own nines auto layout. Now I can say this and this, um, Shift A again, another vertical spacing, and it gives it its own specific spacing. So I can change this auto layout frame and this one. I can change the spacing between them. So the way you set up your auto layout gives specific like connections or contracts between this frame and this frame to say okay, I can control this certain frames, I can control the spacing between the certain frames, and so that's something you should just have in mind. Now this one, when you're doing nested frames, one thing to do is you should always, if you knew that you would have one two and then you wanted to have all of this to have one be in one auto layout frame, you should start with creating like the smaller auto layouts, or the ones with that are going to be having a specific spacing, and then say okay, this and this, Shift A again, and then this and okay, maybe even this and this, Shift A, right? So I want this two to have a specific spacing, I want this and this to now have another specific spacing. So that's how you do it. And the one thing you just have to remember is you have to look at okay, how do I want this layout to be? I want this and all of this to have equal spacing in between. So I'm going to select the three of them, or I'm going to make this a frame or an auto layout frame and then select the three of them and then give it Shift A, so that everything is now 16 in between. So, and that's how you set up auto layout frames, auto layout frame, and you see how it's adjusting. That's one other good thing about auto layout. If it was manual, it won't adjust the way it just did. So, but it keeps making sure that it's properly aligned, things are properly aligned, and yeah. So that's auto layout. Um, we're already out of time. I would have loved to like break this into responsive design. Can I do that? Let me try to do that. Okay, so let's say we wanted to make this responsive. I copy this and I place need to Ctrl X, select Ctrl V, so it's inside of the frame. Now, let's say I wanted to adjust this. If I should do this, this is what happens. We don't want that. So I can I can make this auto layout to say I want this to wrap as it's getting smaller. You do this. This means that this auto layout that is set to horizontal and it only works in horizontal. It then wraps. Um, Now, the thing about responsive, trying to break layouts to be responsive like this is if you want things to adjust to the auto layout frame and grow in height, you have to make the elements like this to all be filled in terms of their width, because if it's not fill in width and you then try to reduce it, it's going to become fixed and it's not just going to work properly. So if you want things to readjust, make sure that the individual element is set to fill so that it respects the frame width, right? So this is fill, this is hog, so it can grow it can grow in height, and because it's filled in terms of width, it keeps on respecting the parent size. Okay, so if I should think this is also fill, this is so for something like this now, say I want it to wrap so that the width is getting smaller, it wraps. And what else? I think we are good. Let's see what happens now. Okay, so this is set to fixed, and that is why it's not. So that's why I said you need to make sure everything is set to fill so that it keeps something like this now is set to fill, but the container outside is set to fixed. So make sure you set everything to fill so that it keeps wrapping properly. Um, so if I continue now, this one, check it out, is set to fixed. So so you have to make sure that everything is set to now. For this, I think the property would be to just click on Ctrl K and reduce, since it's going to act more like an image, um and then just do fill. No, yeah, I will just leave it at Ctrl K. Yeah, so everything is now, it's now easy for everything to just align to this, and so you can now begin to adjust. You can reduce the font size and all, but that's basically how you work with auto layout in terms of responsive design. Make everything feel in terms of width and the height side of things, make it hug, and it just wraps, or it just adjusts to the screen. And for this nested layout, very important in terms of creating complex layout sections, and try and play with hug, fixed, and fill to get um, certain let's say effects in your auto layout um, setting. So yeah, one thing before I go, I think it's it's 30 minutes. One thing you should know is there's this one last thing about there's going to be some layouts where there's this thing that, like for example, if you have this, right, and it's inside of this, and you want to set it to maybe be on this, but there's no way for it to like really do it. You can always use this thing called so here it's called ignore auto layout on web development, we call absolute. So just click on this and then you can then place it where you want to, because it doesn't really fit into a vertical or horizontal axis or direction. So there are some things that you just have to like, okay, this doesn't align anywhere, just do absolute, and then you can then place it where you want to. So yeah, keep practicing, and then you get better. You get more used to how auto layouts layout works. You just improve the more you practice. That's one thing. Don't be scared to approach like this layout. I can use auto layouts. Try, and then you mess up, but then you learn, and then you can come back to this video. You can just keep trying. Thank you for watching. I know it's been a long one, 30 minutes. I didn't plan for it to be 30 minutes, but then I hope you got some value at some point. If you stayed to the end, you're legends. Thank you, and have a good one. Bye.